So the game, it wasn't the prettiest game, Borky.
No, it was not.
Especially the second half. I mean, it kind of dragged a little bit, and you didn't just have a ton of offense and explosiveness. We were kind of going through the scoring summary. After a quarter, it was 14-10. Then with 8:40 to go in the second quarter, Ole Miss ripped off a one-play, 89-yard drive. It took 15 seconds off the clock. That one play was a run away from everyone by 24 in the blue jersey. That is Ulysses Bentley the fourth.
Hey, Dad and I talked about it on Friday. We knew what that would create because he was going to play, and although he was announced as the starter, they still played the converted wide receiver. They started the game with the converted wide receiver at running back instead of him. Mississippi State has one of the worst run defenses in college football, and this is kind of the context that Hayda and I talked about is Bentley can go off, and that doesn't necessarily mean that us were correct in the lack of playing time being nonsensical. But man, you just cannot ignore, and it would be different if it was just that game where he did something like that. It's not just that game. He had the home run against LSU, and although the rushing numbers against Georgia were not great at all, he scored in the red zone, had a really nice red zone touchdown run. Didn't do that against Florida because you were playing a converted wide receiver at running back. And caught the ball well out of the backfield. And so all of the conversation that people have been having all season long, to have that happen again, where he did something that nobody else on that team has shown that they have the ability to do, creates such a level of frustration and distrust that I don't think that they can, quote-unquote, recover from that. Everybody saw it with their own eyes, but especially, Richard, the team itself. So you saw the reaction after he scored. Who came up to him on the sidelines? It wasn't just your typical guy scores a touchdown, everybody pats his helmet and says, good job. All of the veterans on the team made it a point to go, love on him, not just pat him on the helmet. It was different. The reaction was different from the team on the sideline. And that's the same team that has spent all season, you shouldn't air grievances out on social media, but players, hey, free Bentley. Free Bentley. You were on the sidelines of the LSU game. Linemen screaming, free him after he scores a touchdown. So we're not at practice, but they are. They've wanted to see him all season. When he scores a touchdown in his final game, they were the ones that reacted the way that they did. I think that's confirmation of a lot of things that we were told we were wrong about.
I agree with everything you said. You can be true and wrong at the same time. You can make a truthful statement and still be wrong. And when Lane Kiffin cites yards per carry or, they're the big play. I mean, people will be like, well, if you take the two big plays out of his rushing totals, he really didn't do much this year. Do you know how stats work? You don't get to do that. A running back who averages 5 yards per carry doesn't run the ball for 5 yards, nothing more, nothing less, every time he touches the ball. It's an average of your total number of carries. Total yards divided by total carries, get your yards per carry average. I understand that's very basic math, and you're rolling your eyes as I say that. You don't get to take the 89 yards off of the day for Ulysses Bentley and go, well, he only had 136 net, and if you take that 89 out, he only averaged about 2.5 yards a carry. That's why it's an average. And that's why you give it to him 20 times, because there's a chance that one of those 20 is going to result in points, and not points because you plunged it in from 2 yards out. A big play, a game-changing play, a momentum-changing play. That's the value of a back like Ulysses Bentley. I'm not saying he needed to get 20 touches a game. He may not have, especially when you still had Henry Parrish healthy. If you watch Henry Parrish closely, they rode him too hard.
They treated him like he was Derrick Henry.
He was exhausted and gassed.
Banged
He
up.
didn't have enough. Yeah, I mean, It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And so you can be like, well, statistically this, and that can be a true statement. And you can still be wrong in saying, and you just got to make a difficult decision, and this is what we did, and I'm really proud of how he handled the situation. Well, yeah, I guess he handled the situation better than the coaching staff handled the situation. But Borky, the truest thing of all of this, the realest thing of all of this is what you said. It's the reaction from his teammates. If he were a bum, if he weren't performing in practice, if he had lost a step, if he had really truly been passed by 2, 3, 4, 5 other guys on the depth chart and didn't deserve to be on the field, his teammates would not react the way they reacted on the sideline when he finally got an opportunity and just shoved it right up everybody's rear end and into the end zone. They wouldn't have reacted the way they did multiple games this year when he got those opportunities and made the most of it. Does Ulysses Bentley make the difference in winning and losing at Kentucky? I don't know. But we'll never know because he didn't get the chance. He gave you a chance against LSU. That touchdown was huge. Would it have made a difference
on a fourth down as well, by the way?
Would it have made a difference against Florida? I don't know. But he didn't get the chance, and so we don't get to find out.
And it's not even just that he didn't get the chance. It's who did instead. A converted wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, Micah Davis carried it 8 times for 18 yards.
And it's not, and I hate that.
It's not a shot at Micah Davis. I'm sure he's a wonderful young man, and he was asked to do something, and he did the best he could.
And then in the Kentucky game, although it was just a few snaps, Parrish is limping around banged up, and a walk-on that absolutely cannot do in any physical way what Bentley can do.
There's not another running back on the team that can do what Bentley can do. None of them have run away from the entire defense speed. And even if he lost a step, even if he took a step backwards, if he regressed during the offseason, which is what some people have said happened, maybe that's the case in terms of the overall body of work. But there's not another running back on that football team that can do what he did, which is run away from everybody else on the field.
Gave him a crease, and that was it.
He did it against LSU. He did it against Mississippi State. And while neither of those defenses are necessarily the greatest in the history of the game, it's not like a bunch of dudes that are out there running 5 flat 40s either. It's SEC defenses. And he just ran away from them. Is it the reason that you're not in the playoff? I don't know. There are lots of reasons that Ole Miss is not going to be in the playoff. It's one of them. Probably. Most likely. Variations of the question of, is Lane Kiffin accountable? Does he have to answer for this? Is he going to have to answer to fans, donors? What? I mean, not really. He coached a 9-3 football team. He's disappointed. His boss is disappointed. I mean, I guess technically he asked to answer to Grove Collective donors in so much as, wait, you want us to give again? I need you to explain why you did what you did.
Might have to explain it to portal running backs that they're after. And I know the portal hasn't opened yet, but everybody's tampering. Hello, everybody's tampering. And there's been some rumored connection with Ole Miss and a couple of running backs, and I'm sure they're going to have some questions to answer there. I do think that the issue with the offense extends far beyond who's playing running back and their evaluation of said running backs. I said it at the beginning of the show, but I'll say it again. I think Friday was confirmation that the offense is broken. Because I had some people after the game say to me, and some during the game, I thought you said this state defense was bad. They don't look bad today. And with all due respect to Mississippi State, they are bad. They are ranked in the 120s in basically every defensive category.
Probably played their best game.
probably played their best game, but was that aided a little bit by Ole Miss being like? And I'm not a coach, right? The next college football game my coach will be the first, but it felt like every game but Arkansas and Georgia, which you can't remove the successful games, but they feel entirely too predictable. It felt like Mississippi State knew at times exactly what was coming. The variety, the creativity that when you watch other offenses, you just don't get with Ole Miss. And you haven't gotten it all season. And for 2 years, again, there's been great games. The Arkansas game was great. They called a really nice game against Georgia. It's only 28 points, but they called a nice game if you watched it. LSU last year lit up the scoreboard. Penn State last year lit up the scoreboard. But it felt so predictable. Their second half offense, awful. Truly awful. I mean, even in games that they won, the South Carolina game, bad second half offense. Mississippi State, bad second half offense.
Don't you think some of that in those games, though, was they throttled it down a little bit because they just relied on the defense?
What about the losses?
Yeah, it's hard to explain there.
One second half touchdown in their 3 losses this year. Yeah.
I'm with you.
They scored more than 30 points in SEC play one time this year.
We got a message earlier, Borky, asking about Jackson Dart and said he looks like he's playing with no confidence. I could not I strongly disagree with the idea that Jackson Dart is playing without confidence. I think he's as confident a player as has ever stepped on the field at Ole Miss. He's playing hurt.
Really hurt.
He had a severe ankle sprain in the game against Georgia. And it happened early in the game. And has played out this season with a heavily taped ankle and painkillers. Both oral and injected.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that, but I can go 2 + 2 = 4. I know how college football works. Jackson Dart was going to do whatever it took to get back on the football field for this team. This was his team. He was the leader of this team. Guys rallied around him. And yes, I know there were plays where you saw Jackson Dart rip off a 34-yard run against Florida, and he had, a couple of times where he got to the corner and picked up first downs. He's a really athletic kid. He's a really tough kid. No, he's not limping on every single step when he's running. But his ability to step into throws and make things happen with his feet the way he does when he's healthy is what he's having to it's not quite playing on one leg, but you are taking a significant advantage in his game away. And that's just the truth. And if that makes it look like there's a lack of confidence or a lack of indecision, I think any hesitation you see from Jackson Dart is simply because of physical health and nothing else.
Yeah. So it's a lot of things, right? So he's banged up for sure. A lot of people have pointed to offensive line play. Well, it doesn't matter who's playing running back because of how bad the offensive line is. But that's still an issue that needs reflection because this team returned 4 of last year's starting 5 on the offensive line. Returned 4 starters from last year and then added 4 in the transfer portal. All were starters at their previous stop, including 2 from Washington's national championship team and a starting left tackle from North Carolina. And the unit regressed. So you add 4 portal players and you return 4 starters and you get worse. That's a problem too. And so they don't have the players on the offensive line. Well, they both failed in development and evaluation then, if that's the case. So there are a lot of things that they can get better at offensively, and they need to. And I don't know if it comes in the form of staff changes. I don't know if it comes in the form of schematic changes or personnel changes, but they squandered the opportunities this season because they couldn't score in close games, specifically in the second half. Defensively, they got a championship-level performance every single week. They played good enough defense to win every single game. They couldn't score enough. So if anybody can fix offensive issues, it is Lane Kiffin, but that needs to start happening because that's where they came up short. Big picture stuff, 30,000-foot view. It was offense that failed this team.
Yeah. Walter Nolan was the best player on the field Saturday. You agree?
Oh, absolutely. He's a monster.
From a defensive tackle spot, 8 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 3.5 tackles for loss. Just no answer for him.
I put this on Twitter. I want your thought because I moved here in 2010, so I didn't get to see some of these guys that get brought up. But you can't just look at stats with defensive tackles. You have to really watch them play to get a gauge. Walter Nolan had the best season as a defensive tackle for Ole Miss since ... when?
I mean, Robert Kimdichie in 2014.
See, I think Robert Kimdichie had a season like Walter Nolan's only in his dreams. Talent-wise, you can compare the two, but the season production from game 1 to game 12?
Well, you said best season since when? I mean, that's probably where I would go.
But who has had a better one, I guess? When's the last time you've seen a better or equal season to the one that he just had?
At that position, it's really hard. I mean, you want to do that comparison? You really got to go to Starkville if you want to go with a player in recent memory. You're going to Simmons or Fletcher Cox, Chris Jones. I mean, that's what you're talking about.
He's that level of player.
Yeah, 100%.
And what's so fascinating to me about him in particular is the narrative about him when he left A&M, remember?
Well, and it may not have been just a narrative. It may have been true. But they had a culture issue at Texas A&M. And they were paying a lot of kids a lot of money, and they weren't holding them accountable at all. And, whether it's Walter Nolan had good people around him or he realized that he had to put great tape together for scouts and knew that he was being watched on every single play, whatever it was, Walter Nolan was elite this year for Ole Miss.
In every game, and playing hurt, too. I mean, he's got a bum ankle and, apparently now this really bad hand injury and just kept on plugging.
Yeah. Walter Nolan was the best player on defense. Chris Paul was the most valuable player.
I can get there.
He was just...
He had a great season, too, man.
I mean phenomenal. Phenomenal.
That's why, because I saw some State fans critical of Lebby after the Egg Bowl, the offense. Well, the offense wasn't good enough. And look, they only scored 14 points. Both of their touchdowns came in the first quarter. But I don't know. Maybe I was watching without clear eyes, or clean eyes is the phrase that he used. But schematically, I thought State was really well prepared to play against that Ole Miss defense.
Yeah.
I think they lacked the players to be able to execute enough to score a lot of points. State up front just would not. They wouldn't have been able to score for 4 quarters. They didn't have the players to block that front. Schematically, play calling.
Yeah,
I thought he had a really good day. Lebby did. I thought they were really well prepared and schemed.
You had a couple of people say Parade Jerry in his last year at Ole Miss, elite on the defensive line. They had one person that went back a little bit farther, talked about Tim Bowens and Norman Hand. I mean, you're talking early mid-90s if those are the guys you're going to.